My brother Percy, he started playing, and then I got a guitar and started playing, and we played like shadows numbers and stuff like this. And then eventually he joined a wee band called the Combats, and we played local dances in St Johnston and place. I played rhythm, he played lead, and my father was very musical. He played the accordion when I was young, and a lot of his relations that had moved away to Canada and Australia and stuff had been musical as well. And I was a real keen country music lover, and he used to go up every Saturday to Corey's music shop in Larrykenny and buy a long player, as he called it, and he would come home and sit in the room and listen to them on a gramophone originally. Then he bought a electric record player, and he liked Hank Williams and Merle Haggard and all the better country people. He really liked Jim Reeves and stuff like this, and played with different bands. A band called the Scripto, we were a young 4-piece, and we played Dublin, we played a lot. And then from that I moved on. Then I left, and I went, when I was about 21 or 22, I just left and I went away for about 5 or 6 months, and I lived in Greece and all over Europe. It was that sort of happy time. People just travelled, and I had been studying architecture before that, but I gave that up as well. And then I came back and joined the Playboys, a show band, and then joined the Plattermen, a show band, played in various show bands, Plattermen. And I went on. Then I was going out with Garrett from Larrykenny, and I wanted to move to Larrykenny, so I joined a band of young Keene people, all crazy characters from Larrykenny, called the Jets, and the drummer was Lawrence Doherty, who I've played with maybe for 40 years to stage, and my brother was in that band. Then myself, the drummer, and Hugo Blake left that band, and we formed Rue La Roost with Pete O'Hanlon and Percy, my brother, and Dennis Desmond managed us, and we done tours in London, England, everywhere, and we were sort of the band in Ireland for a while at that time. And then eventually that sort of a punk came in, and we were sort of playing like Little Feat or the band, and a lot of original. And when I listen back to it now, it was so fresh. And but the punk thing is, no record companies really interested, so we sort of give it up. And I was living in Larrykenny for a while. And then we formed Quardeck, myself and Lawrence and Paul Miller, and it went on from that for a few years, and we had a lot of singles that were played. We toured in Europe and England, and John McIver had managed Quardeck, and he worked eventually for a company called Asgard, and Paul Charles is a co-owner of Asgard. He lives in Ramelton. And then on Quardeck, they had lots of chances. A&M Records were interested, Rod Durr Music was interested, but we just decided to take a break, and Lorraine went to London, and the sax player went to Greece. Different people went to different bands, and a record company wanted us really to try to get us back together again, but we'd all moved on at that time, so we just done our own thing. And then I always had been interested in doing sound and stuff, and I'd engineered some of Quardeck's singles and stuff. And John was working for Asgard at that time, and they rang me up and said I could work with John Hyatt, and I was a big fan of John Hyatt from America, so went out and done tour with John Hyatt, and then I done different acts like John Lee Hooker and various other acts, Mary Hart, loads of acts for Asgard as tour manager and doing sound for them. And my career sort of changed from being a bass player to a sound engineer, and then I came back to Ireland, and I started a PA company in Galway called Sound Solution with Derek Murray. He's a guitar player and stunning. And we went, after about 3 or 4 years in Galway, we were doing all the festivals, and I was doing sound for lots of bigger Irish acts and at festivals all over Europe. And then Mary Black was doing a tour in Australia, and I was engineering that tour, and she asked me would I permanently go to her. Well, I didn't actually. I still worked with lots of different bands, but I started doing some of her tours and her albums, and I've worked with her up until maybe the last couple of albums, done all the albums, and really travelled the world with her, but also with Alton and different acts, and I played, and then it brought me. I'm back here now, and I have this place called the Groove Shack, and I just take on sort of projects that I like of musicians around here, like Jonathan Smeaton or Maria McCormick, different people, and lots of different people, and record albums for them and produce albums. Now, originally I was with Quarterdeck. I remember one of the things I fell out with the studio engineer because I thought he wanted to sound too much like Steely Dan. So although I love Steely Dan, I didn't really want Quarterdeck to sound like that. So he actually had used sample drums other than taking the real drums. A bit of an argument, and he left. So I ended up doing the album or doing the recording myself. And when I listen back, I still like the sound of it. And I was always involved a bit in recording and demos and way back. And I've been often asked to do albums, but I always felt intimidated going into big studios with 48 channel desks and stuff. But then when I actually went in and worked in recording studios and multi and stuff, I realised that it's much easier being a studio engineer. In modern days, studio engineers really have to learn computer programs and stuff, but the older engineers have to learn about music, which is the important thing. It's not the recording technique, it's the music at the end of the day. And they've always had originality about Donegal bands, and even the show bands. Way back in the show band, a lot of the musicians came from Donegal, and like I played in the Fiesta Ballroom Relief every Friday night when I was really young, before all the big show bands, and you learnt a lot doing that then, and Balbuffet and the Butt Hall, and it was like, at that time there was so much music back in the early 70s, and there was no discos hardly at all, so there would have been maybe playing 5 nights a week around, AOH halls, Orange halls, every type of halls in Donegal, and dance halls, bigger dance halls, and the show bands were the same, and people tended to go out far more then as well, and the musicians made money as well. And then when it came, they probably made much better money then than they even do now. Growing up along the border being a musician, well, it never really made any difference. All the bands that I played in were all mixed religions, and we played in the Pound Lonely Club in Belfast, and show bands were, I think, some battalion of the IRA used to run it. We played on the other side, and we had occasionally things. I was playing in a hall outside Limavady one time, and because we were playing a southern van, they slashed the tires and broke the windows, and we had to get a police escort. There are different things happen, but no physical damage, thank God, and sometimes we would be stopped by various paramilitaries, and normally this is all before the Miami, but normally they just looked on musicians, everybody, like we used to have a neighbour called Tommy Doherty that lived on the next door farm, and he always talked about me and Percy. He said, them boys are very special because they've got music, so they don't adhere to any sort of religion. Music is their religion, All the Quarterdeck stuff was so much, far too much fretless space, and I want to listen back to it. But there's something nice playing, and I used when I listen back to some of the a lot of the songs were built around, like, riffs like that, or no. A lot of artistic stuff would be around riffs that we played, and then with Jonathan's stuff and all that stuff, or Ian Smith's stuff, or different people that ask me to play on, I'll play really some very simple, and then if they ask me to take a wee bit of solo, I'll take a wee bit of. Normally it's just around thirds or something, I used to know so many more chaps that I know now. When I listen back, when I was playing when I was 25 or 26, even in the rest of riffs like that, I just listened to that recently. And there's so many of them that I knew, whereas now they get less because I don't bother using them. But sometimes. But then I played too much, whereas now I try to keep it a bit simpler, you know what I mean? Well, I'll say, like, for instance, some acts that I toured with were, this is a funny sort of thing, is John Lee Hooker. There's a photograph of him behind me there, but he was huge at the time of the Healer album, and his band were really funny. He didn't pay them that well, but they all had ways of making their own money, and they could really tour. Deacon Jones, the keyboard player, would go into a hotel on the night off, and he'd say to the receptionist, "You're my main man," and then that woman or man would be tortured until they left. And can you book a table for the best restaurant in town? And we would be all bet and taken to the best restaurant in town, and then Deacon would go in first, and he'd say, "I forgot to change some money into your currency. Perhaps." We're actually a band from America, and it's actually, you've probably heard of him, John Lee Hooker, and maybe if you could wine and dine us tonight, we could put maybe 20 people on the guest list for the show tomorrow night, and you can have your photographs and get your camera, and imagine John Lee Hooker up on the wall, and every night it worked. We'd get a free meal, and then they'd come to the concert hall the next night, and they'd come up and he'd say, "Bring it backstage," and he says, "How's about we go back to your place for a few drinks?" So we'd probably get a drink the next night as well. And they would sell, John Lee used to sign t-shirts, and they would sell the t-shirts behind the stage and stuff to other musicians. And John Lee would always have to have a white chair, and then when I'd take the band to the festival or whatever, and when he'd seen the white chair, I'd give him a Sharpie and he'd write John Lee Hooker on the chair. And then when he's out playing, he would come out and he'd do the show on he's John Lee Hooker or the chair. And then he would, halfway through the show, or before the end of the show, I'd be out front and he'd say, "Hey Bill, I want a boogie." And so I'd run up through the audience and come to the side of the stage. And then John Lee would hand me his guitar, and I'd take the chair, and he'd do all this, that I'd done the Healer, and then that would be show over. And then when we'd be getting into the limo, I'd be accompanying John back to the hotel. John would always say, "Bring my chair," and the promoter obviously would be saying goodbye to John, and then he'd say, "What's with the chair?" And John Lee said, "That's my chair. That's my name's written on that chair. That's my chair." And he'd say, "No, but." He said, "No, it's my chair, my name's on it." And then he'd say, I'm not going to be around too long. Can you imagine how much that's going to be worth? A chair signed by John Lee, that John Lee sat and played a show on? You're going to make a lot of money. I'll take $150 for that chair." And he used to sell the chair every night to the promoter. That's only a tip of the iceberg tour to them. But they really know how to tour, and have a good time. No, there are lots of interesting people came here and recorded, and all the local people like Maria McCormick and Jonathan and stuff. And then I was walking the Camino with Sam Gibson, Sam R. Gibson from Belfast, and sadly Sam passed away from brain tumour. But anyway, his ashes are actually over there on the windowsill. We're doing a new album of Sam's songs, and we're getting guest singers on. And it's funny because I was shaking his ashes to show his wife that we were going to start one of the songs with the noise of his eyes shaking and the thing, and we suddenly realised ashes are blowing all over the place. So there are ashes everywhere in there. Sam's everywhere. But he's a lovely man, and I walked the Camino on 3 or 4 different occasions with him, and the first time I walked the Camino he started singing songs, and he was about 60 something, and I said, "Oh, they're great songs, Sam." Yes, he says, "I'm not the best singer, but he could play a few chords," and he had a great sense of lyrics and nice chords and guitar. So he came up here, and about I'd say about 3 or 4 days I got a musicians together and we recorded Seeking the Assassin, which everybody should listen to. It's an album. Sam always said that death was the assassin, and some Camino songs on. Some of the songs were used on the Camino website, and then he came and done another song, and it was titled Holding Up the Sky, about a man that always had shell shock after the war, and he always held his hands, and he used to call him Holding Up the Sky in Belfast. But he wrote some very, very good songs. And the project after the next album with Steve, or Seamus McGuire and Steve Cooney, will be a posthumous or whatever album with Sam's songs, and we're just getting various musicians from Donegal, and everybody's just going to play on, Seamus Devaney and Patter Call and different people, and Kieran Burke from Belfast is going to play piano, and maybe Pat Crowley may play accordion, something on, and do an album because he left a legacy of so many songs that hadn't been recorded, so it's worth doing it, you know. One time I used to do a bit of guitar repairing like your father, and I James McDade's father one time said to me, "Billy, I have a wee guitar out in the house." He said, and I was thinking of taking the guitar up. He said, now this man is about 95 when he said this to me. He said, and I'm thinking, practicing, and I might become a guitar player even. He said, so I went out to his house, and he brought out this wee plastic guitar with, I think, a picture of the Beatles on it, but it had 6 wee strings on it, and you could tune it up. But the arm, as he called it, the neck was broken off it. And he said, I went into the town, he said, and I bought some glue. He said, it was called a Yoo-hoo glue, he said, and I repaired it. He said, but it wasn't very satisfactory, because when I tightened up the strings, the arm fell off the wee guitar again. And then he said, so could you repair that wee guitar? And I said, I could. You probably need epoxy resin. He said, I'm not sure that is, but I'll pay whatever it costs now. I said, well, I'll try my best. And as I was leaving the house, he said, excuse me, Bill. I said, what? He said, you when you repair that wee guitar, you couldn't happen to give me a guarantee, he said. And I said, guarantee? He said, a guarantee that it wouldn't break. And I said, why? He said, because I have every intention when I get that guitar back, he said, of practicing diligently. He says every day, he says, as long as it takes, he says, and can you imagine, he says, my embarrassment, he said, if I became very, very good on that guitar, and I was given a recital in the Sydney Opera House, he said, and my embarrassment if the arm fell off my wee guitar. Right, you're asking me about that Grammy, what is it, certificate up there, and it's nothing special. I was engineered an album in a studio in Dublin. John McEwen from the Nitty Dirt Band asked me to engineer a thing, because I'd worked with Nitty Gritty Dirt Band before, that he was producing for Steve Martin, actor, basically plays banjo, and he was recorded up in Pulse Studios, because he's a fan. Steve Martin used to put on disguise and come to Mary Black's gigs in LA and stuff, believe it or not. And then the backing track almost done, most of the backing track done for Mary's song, but it was in the wrong key. I could change it so Mary could sing the different key, and I went up and I engineered the track, and I helped with another track. in Paul Studios, and I ended up staying about Dublin with Steve Martin, the comedian, for a day, and he's unbelievable. He would tell you his life story in 5 minutes. He's a lovely man, and I took him to the bar up and what do you call that bar up in Smithfield, the cobblestone, and he was in, and everybody's coming in and said, "Are you Steve Martin?" He said, "Yeah. Do you want a photograph? Can you take a photograph for me as well with my camera?" And he had all the people there. He's lovely, and he got his driver, the private plane. Him and Tony Triscoll were there, and he got the driver to wait until everybody got the photographs. He got his plane back, and he's lovely. And then the producer sent me. He said, "Believe it or not, that you worked on has got a Grammy, and because you worked on, you're an engineer on, you got that Grammy thing." But I never really think twice about it. But people look at it and it's not like I got a Grammy at all. It's just like I was an engineer in one of the tracks, you know. Still. What made me want to live near Melton, I got sort of fed up. I was always away. All my life I've been away travelling, you know. And when I was working as a sound engineer big time, I'd be away 3 weeks and back a week away, and I lived in different places. And anyway, but I always fancied Melton. And I used to come to Melton for drinks and stuff. And I knew James McDade, who owns a wine bar now. And I was friendly with James's father. And there's a man called Mick Gurney, is a Frenchman that had been a circus performer. And he had fought during the war for, I think, about 4 or 5 different sides. And had been a prisoner of war. And he had bullet holes here. He'd been shot at the Battle of Monte Cassino. And he had shot himself in the hand, he said, to get out of Hitler Youth. And he couldn't go back to France, so he ended up moving. He became a seaman. He travelled the world, and he ended up meeting a woman from Ireland, and he had 2 kids, Roger and Marcel. But then she moved back to Ireland, and she is from Melton, and I don't think he appeared back until maybe the oldest was maybe about 9 or something, and he appeared back in a white suit, as they say, and a red bow tie. And Mick had been a circus performer called the Great Zaboo, and one of the times I met him, he was a strong man in a place called the Palace Hotel in Bundoran, and he used to go to the cliffs in Bundoran and tie a bathing costume on him and tie a towel around his body and pour paraffin oil over his head and set himself on fire and jump over the cliff into the water. And that's the kind of guy I was. So I was really friendly with Mick, and he always says, "Hey Billy, you must move to Melton. You must move to Melton." So I always fancied Melton, and I came down and I met his son Marcel and his wife Annie, and was really friendly with them. And I always liked the vibe around Melton, and the people were lovely. And I've lived here on and off ever since. Well, I've been away, and I was going to Galway and different places, but I've always had a house here.